Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us for the Powering Ontario Towards Net Zero through Electrification. My name is Ian McLean, and I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and the Ontario Power Generation for arranging this with us today, and always a great opportunity for me to put on a suit and tie, so thank you as well, which doesn't happen as often during COVID as we might like. So before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we do live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples, as we seek through them a renewed relationship based on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect. As participants in today's virtual event, we are coming together as one. We believe everyone is free to be their true self and receive the same respect and opportunity, regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, culture, identity, sexual orientation, beliefs, or language. We hope you'll join us in fostering a positive environment here today to ensure a safe and welcoming space for all. We know there is more to do, that we can do, and are committed to listening and learning as we go. Today's session is brought to you by the Ontario Power Generation in support with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Just before the session starts, I'd like to go over a quick few reminders. Please ensure that your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so we can reduce any background noise. If you have any questions that come up through the session, you can type them into the question box in your control panel at any time. If it's tech related, a member of our team will get back to you right away. And as questions come in for the presenter today, they'll be gathered throughout the session, and I'll try and make sure those get answered. All attendees will be sent a recording of today's presentation afterwards, so you can share it with your colleagues. I would now like to introduce Michelle Eaton, Vice President Public Affairs with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. A communications and public affairs professional for close to 15 years, Michelle joined the OCC team in 2018 and is Vice President of Public Affairs. Michelle brings extensive leadership experience from both the public and private sectors. She has provided strategic direction, vision, and advice on communications and public affairs strategies to executives in multinational Fortune 500 companies, as well as senior federal cabinet ministers. Michelle is also the chair of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and on the board of directors of Public Affairs Association of Canada. Welcome, Michelle, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Ian. Thanks for having me today. And let me just take a moment to commend you and the entire team for putting together today's event and all the work that you do for local business and for your entire community. It's just been incredible. In particular, I want to salute your most recent initiative in collaboration with the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, along with partners, Communitech, Waterloo EDC, and the federal and provincial governments on a pilot program that aims to put rapid COVID-19 antigen screening kits in the hands of our small and medium businesses in their workplaces free of charge. So bravo to all of you for this initiative. We at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce are working to make this happen across the province through the Chamber network. And I just have to say, we're just so proud of the incredible network of chambers of commerce and boards of trade across the province. They continue to just go above and beyond to support relief efforts, local businesses and their communities during this crisis. So thank you to the entire chamber network. And wow, what a wonderful representation of all three levels of government today. Really happy you're here for today's conversation, but most importantly, I want to sincerely thank each and every one of you for your leadership throughout this crisis. It's been so important and for all communities across Canada and in the province of Ontario. And then finally, we're proud of our members like Opg, and I'd like to commend Opg's efforts to address climate change in a way that will help create new jobs, nurture new industries that protect the environment and make our economy stronger for current and future generations. Really looking forward to hearing your presentation today, Heather, and thank you for all for joining for today's important discussion.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I do want to say, just to build on Michelle's comments, we are very fortunate here in Waterloo Region. Governor General David Johnston always said there's something in the water in Waterloo region around barn building and working together, and I think our partnerships that not only our chamber and my colleague Greg DeRocher's chamber have with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, sponsors and partners like Opg and others, but also, as you see, when I made the ask of Bardish and Dave and Catherine to join us, they were more, as always, willing to give their time to join us and be part of the events that we do. So thank you for, again, to the partnerships right across the board. So now I have the pleasure of introducing the Honourable Bardish Chagger, MP for Waterloo. Bardish is elected as MP in 2015 and named as the Minister of Small Business and Tourism by Prime Minister Trudeau later that year. Prior to being an MP for Waterloo, Bardish worked at the KW Multicultural Centre, an organization that assists new Canadians as they transition to full participation in our community's life. As the Special Projects Coordinator, Bardish planned and coordinated the annual KW Multicultural Festival in Kitchener's Victoria Park, bringing together community, cultural, and business groups in Waterloo region. She's also worked with other agencies to offer an annual Global Skills Conference to introduce foreign trained professionals to related professions and to find meaningful employment. Over to you, Bardish, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Ian and everyone here. Thank you. I'm going to be honest with everyone watching. I'm also in the middle of a vote in the House of Commons, so if I do get taken away to my second screen, it's just to confirm my identity, but I have voted so that we can continue with the government's agenda. It's really, it's good to be here, and it's really good to be having this conversation. Climate change is real, and the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us how Canadians have what it takes to come together to mobilize and to take action in the face of a crisis. The climate crisis is just another great challenge that we see a lot of leadership. And I have to commend just some of the changes that OPG has made, and I'll get to that in a second. Climate change is a challenge of our times, and young people are really asking us to step up and be part of that transformation. But it is also one of the greatest opportunities. Climate action creates new opportunities for engineers, scientists, farmers, construction workers, tradespeople, resource workers, energy workers, researchers, small businesses, and the list goes on. Since 2015, Canada has invested roughly $60 billion towards climate action and clean growth. In 2020, we announced an additional investment of $15 billion for Canada's Strengthened Climate Plan, along with nearly $15 billion for public transit in February 2021. Building on these recent investments, Budget 2021 that just came out proposes to provide $17.6 billion towards a green recovery to create jobs, build a cleaner economy, and fight and protect against climate change. And so in December 2020, we shared the Strengthened Climate Plan, and we mentioned that in 2014, clean electricity made up the largest share of total clean energy exports at $7.7 billion. By 2019, the clean electricity and power equipment total grew to almost $9 billion, which is at an annual rate of nearly 5.1%. To bring these benefits to households and communities across Canada, we are investing to advance smart renewable energy and grid modernization projects to enable the clean grid of the future. This includes support to increase renewable power generation capacity such as wind and solar, and the deployment of grid modernization technologies such as power storage. This work will support the electrification of the broader economy and help jurisdictions minimize the role of fossil fuel-fired electricity generation in their electricity systems, as well as rural, remote, and Indigenous communities that currently rely on diesel have the opportunity to be powered by clean, reliable energy by 2030 is the goal. So in the Strengthened Climate Plan, we launched the Net Zero Accelerator to help build and secure Canada's clean industrial advantage. By investing in decarbonizing large emitters, transforming key sectors from steel and aluminum to cement, and accelerating the adoption of clean technology across the economy, for example, the auto and aerospace sectors, the Net Zero Accelerator will spur Canada's shift to innovative net zero technologies and attract the large-scale investment needed to meet our goal of net zero by 2050. And Budget 2021 proposes additional support to the Net Zero Accelerator to support projects that will help reduce domestic greenhouse gas emissions across Canada's economy. So when OPG closed its coal stations, it marked one of the largest single actions to combat climate change in the world. Their transition to a diverse and clean generation portfolio has helped decarbonize Ontario's electricity systems and other sectors like transportation. And I think it's something that all Ontarians and all Canadians should be very proud of. And we saw the changes of that when it came to smog days and so forth. So it really is about leadership. It really is about working together. And it really is about what can every one of us do to get us to that cleaner future. And we've noticed with the pandemic that everyone's been impacted, disproportionately certain sectors and certain segments. And so we've seen these inequalities be exposed, but we've also seen the opportunities come out. And I think that's where, as we build back even better, we can build back consciously more inclusive, including with the environment. So I'm really looking forward to the Q&A session today. I'm really grateful to the Chamber for giving us this opportunity to come together. It's great to be here with Dave and Catherine. We're all in one building. I think the riding of Waterloo is the only riding in the whole country where all 3 levels of government are in one building, but the pandemic has not allowed us to see each other, so it's good to be here virtually with you. I hope everyone keeps healthy and safe. Please continue following public health guidelines, because we will beat this virus and we will build a cleaner, greener future for all Canadians together. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Bardish. Appreciate that. And next, I'd like to call on Catherine Fife, MPP for Waterloo. Catherine has served 3 terms as the NDP MPP for Waterloo since she was elected first in 2012. Catherine's current parliamentary roles include being the critic for official opposition for Finance and Treasury Board. She's a member of the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs and the official opposition caucus chair. Catherine lives in Waterloo with her husband Dale and their kids Aiden and Claire. Welcome, and over to you, Catherine.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you all from Queen's Park. I do miss Bardish and Dave. There were times prior to the pandemic that I would see them more than I would see my own family. So this is the first time that we've had a chance to sort of come together. So thank you for organizing. And I know that a lot of you have done a considerable amount of work in the sector, and so I don't want to speak too long, but pre-pandemic, MPPs and staff here in the Ontario NDP caucus were engaging in consultations with the Green New Democratic Deal. My colleagues and I met with a number of amazing folks, including those who are from Manulife, and I believe some of those folks are actually on the call today. Listen, the pandemic delayed the publishing of that Green New Deal, but the work has continued, and it was finally released earlier this year. And so I'm just going to go very high level on what our climate plan commits to, because there's great alignment with what OPG is putting forward as well, and federally as well. I mean, this really and truly should be a nonpartisan directive, because we really have been called to act. And while the pandemic has sort of, disrupted that work, it really is a calling from future generations and our own children, actually. So our climate plan actually commits to implement an environmental justice lens on every policy. Sometimes fear can derail really progressive ideas around energy development, around electrification. And so we need to bring everyone along with us. Our plan also has an emission reductions of at least 50% by 2030, which is doable, and net zero by 2050. So there is alignment with the federal government. We also would implement a carbon budgeting process for interim targets, so to secure financing along the way. 100% of new car sales should be electric by 2035. Again, a very doable measure. I think that one of the plans that I'm most excited about is the retrofitting of buildings, because there are good jobs to be created by retrofitting buildings, and we have a very ambitious plan in that regard, and we worked with organizations like REAP to make that happen. People will ask, how are you going to pay for this? And so you do have to demonstrate, in order to build confidence in the strategy and in the plan, you have to demonstrate how you will pay for it. And as you know, cap and trade fell off this particular government's agenda. We will be reintroducing a cap and trade program in the province of Ontario. It will be very ambitious, and we are very focused on expanding the province's green bond program. I want to share just a quick few details about the role we see electrification playing in the bigger plan, because it is key. On public transit, we will take immediate steps to electrify the GO train network on an accelerated timeline to replace the dirty diesel trains along all lines. We'll work with municipalities to electrify all municipal transit fleets by 2040, and this will be in partnership with municipalities. We'll establish a grant program to help municipalities to buy electric transit vehicles. On the auto side of things, the plan calls for the creation of a comprehensive zero emissions vehicle strategy to support the auto industry. We want to ensure that the government fleet of vehicles is electrified by 2030. We believe that government can and should be leading on some of these initiatives, and investing in a province-wide charging infrastructure program, including on broader public sector properties. I think the time has come for us to move past partisan decisions on the work that needs to be done to protect our environment, also to strengthen our economy. We see these hand in hand. We don't see them in competition or one canceling out the other. We need to work together to protect what we have for future generations, and I would say that that work needs to be accelerated, and that takes leadership. And so, very happy to be part of this conversation today, to learn alongside my colleagues, and I also look forward to the question and answer period.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and a couple of comments building on both of yours. Is retrofitting and making those investments in buildings is good both for this conversation around the energy mix and et cetera as it relates to energy. But we know we're going to have to do that anyways. COVID has taught us that we need to have better ventilation and other things that are connected. So I think you're both right. COVID has created some barriers, but it's also identified deficiencies and where there's some opportunities. And so building on the energy part as well as our health and safety piece is important. And electrification, as MPP Fife talks about, no chamber meeting would be successful if I didn't say all day two-way go. Between Toronto and Waterloo region. So I've said that now, but it is important, and electrification of the transportation network is a huge part of both from the environmental front, but it's economic development and it is job creation as well. So thank you for that. Last but certainly not least is Mayor Dave Jaworski, and I would be at pains, I'd be in trouble if I didn't point out that he is a former board member of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. I believe he was foolish enough to be on the board that actually hired me 10.5 years ago. So I thank him for making that mistake. It's been a great mistake for me, but he's also a good friend from business days as well. Mayor Jaworski's lived in the community since graduating from the University of Waterloo in 1988. 88? So I was going to say 78. You're not that old, Dave. 1988. As a student, he chose U of W for its strong collaboration with the business community and its focus on cooperative education. Later in his career, the mayor supported the collaboration by contributing to the co-op partnership as an executive of BlackBerry. And in his leadership role at BlackBerry, he created the Global Corporate Social Responsibility Team, ensuring the company was viewed as a great corporate citizen, which it most surely was. As the mayor of the city of Waterloo, he is committed to fostering prosperity and promoting our vibrant and caring community. Over to you, Dave.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ian. It's a, I think what people are going to understand by the end of this is the friendship and camaraderie that we have here of all levels of government, the business community here in Waterloo and Waterloo region. I'm gonna take a stroll down memory lane now. Ian I did graduate in 1988, but I'm gonna take you back to 1968. And my dad, he bought a 1968 Buick LeSabre with a big 350 V8, lots of horsepower. He was so proud of that car. And he was so proud of that car on Sundays, even though he's a small business owner, small construction company owner. He would take me, we lived in Norfolk County, take drives down to Lake Erie. And back when I was a few years old, there was this massive construction project ongoing on the shores of Lake Erie. And what it was the Nano generating station. And it took 4 years, so I doubled in age in those times by the time it was constructed. But it was generating 4,000 megawatts of electricity, capable 24/7. And it was the largest coal-fired plant at its time and maybe ever in North America. But that Buick, she's long gone, and but it's symbolic of our conversation today. So just as Nanocoke is converting into a solar generating station, clean energy, but we have to look at it. That's 40 megawatts, 1/100th, and obviously not 24 hours a day with solar. So we all need to look in the mirror and make changes towards a sustainable lifestyle, a net zero lifestyle. Now, it took over 100 global countries many years to settle on the Paris Agreement. Really proud of Canada's step forward in that. But at municipal council meetings, you know, when it came to us, it took probably less than an hour to commit to the 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050. And but we know the citizens want it, and we don't have all the luxury of the federal and provincial government of policies to command people to do things, or businesses. We actually have to motivate people to do things, and that's something that we, all of us, I know, do in our daily actions. So we're making changes, and I'll highlight some that we've made accomplishments locally. In 2017, we swapped out our street lights for LED lights, saving over $500,000 a year with a return on investment of 7 years. Now, $500,000, that maybe doesn't sound much in global perspectives, but that's about 0.8% of our property tax budget. That's a huge amount. And reducing the consumption, the demand on OPG. We've partnered with the University of Waterloo. We're very fortunate here to be Canada's education city with Conestoga College, Wilfrid Laurier, and University of Waterloo. So we partnered with them to reduce emissions on our large work truck. You see, when work trucks are parked, the diesel engines are still running on many of them because we need them to generate electricity for all the tools that are used in the municipal work efforts. And the Waterloo trucks were a pilot project where the University of Waterloo put a solar array battery system on them. So now when our workers are out there, they can actually turn off the truck and rely on solar energy, stored solar energy, to run the tools that they need. We're enabling electric vehicles, and I know that's going to be a prominent part of the discussion. It has been already by installing EV charging stations at our municipal sites. And our region of Waterloo new $100 million bus maintenance depot will have each and every spot enabled as we look towards a future of electric bus fleet here in the region of Waterloo. Now, it takes community partnerships to get things done at a local level, and to take such important actions. We've partnered with Sustainable Waterloo Region, Climate Action Waterloo Region to develop the interim 2030 targets to transform Waterloo Region with a major reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. That's a massive commitment, as 2030 is on the horizon, and we have to rely on citizens to help make that change in addition to municipal efforts. So we realize that the foundation of our success of our changes are dependent upon a clean, sustainable, and always available supply of electricity. And that is why my city council, through our sustainability committee in January, wrote a letter to Premier Ford to express our concern over increasing natural gas generation, because carbon generation may not be the way to go, but I'm looking forward to learning more. And that's why I'm excited to hear from OPG today on what we can look forward to as part of our net zero climate initiatives here. You know, there's other work to be done. As a member of Waterloo North Hydro, these transformations mean that we're moving to a smart electricity grid, such as the solar feed-in arrays that many homeowners have installed. Residents are not the only consumers of electricity, they're also generators as well. And we have to prepare for a future when Ontarians are all plugging in their electric vehicles, as Catherine said, by 2035, plugging in those electric vehicles at night, ready to hit the distribution grid, and it has to be able to handle it, and so does our generation system. So while my dad's 1968 Buick LeSabre, Google it if you don't know it, big will always be a fond memory for me, we need to remind ourselves that our sustainable future can be both environmentally friendly and even better. While that old Buick had maybe 200 horsepower, our modern EVs have much more power and torque and zero emissions. So at Ontario, we can be proud of the electricity generation today, the net zero preparations for the future, and my thanks to the Chamber of Commerce for enabling this briefing today. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Dave. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Heather Ferguson. She's Vice President of Corporate Affairs with Ontario Power Generation. Heather's responsible for all stakeholder outreach, government relations, Indigenous relations, and corporate communications activities in support of OPG's business plans. Heather has more than 20 years experience in the resource development, energy, and electricity sectors, which includes OPG's VP of New Business Ventures and Electrification, the VP of Environment, and the Director of the Hydro Business Development Group. In these roles, she was instrumental in creating OPG's Electrification Development Group, as well as assembling the company's new nuclear team working to advance small modular nuclear reactors. As the Hydro Business Development lead, Heather and her team successfully built northern power projects in partnership with Indigenous communities. She also has worked previously in the Calgary office of Golder Associates, supporting clients from the mining and oil and gas sectors. Heather currently serves as a director on the boards of Atura Power, the Canadian Nuclear Association, and the Council of Great Lakes Region. She holds an undergraduate and master's degree in science from Queen's University, as well as an MBA from the Rotman School of Management. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you. Can everybody see my screen and hear me okay?
All good.
All good? Okay. And wow, you went through the whole full bio there. Thank you. That's always a little bit embarrassing. But it's really excellent to be here with such a group of like-minded individuals. And I really appreciate what you said about, the camaraderie and the collegiality that seems to be around the table here and in the region of Waterloo about working together on this significant issue we have around climate change and more specifically around electrification. So, I'm gonna touch on a few of the things that folks have already mentioned. I mean, the Nano and coal closure remains a great point of pride, I guess, in getting us where we are now in terms of a clean system. But transit fleets and charging infrastructure and even most specifically, Dave, you mentioned about charging habits, so when you have electric vehicles, what kind of charging habits can really support the grid and can support efficient electrification. So you guys have done a fantastic job laying the foundation. And now I'll dive into a little bit about OPG, just for context for some of the folks on the line, but then a bit about our climate change goals that we've set out as a company. And then I'll drill in a bit on the electrification pieces. So hope that works for everyone. So again, just a little bit of context about OPG. Who are we? We're the largest clean power generator and clean technology innovator. That's quite a mouthful, but we produce about half the power in the province. So again, we're the generator. Roughly 60 billion in assets, and we employ, 9,000 is the figure here, but when you add in also the host of contractors and folks further down the supply chain that we employ, it's upwards around 12,000 employees or staff that we employ across Ontario. So a significant employee base, and we generate about 19,000 megawatts of electricity. This visual here is just to give you a sense of our assets, of our footprint. The map always is somewhat disproportionate, I think, in focusing on the U.S. Hard to find a map that doesn't do that. But the takeaway here is we have a very significant footprint in Ontario. Our key asset base, our key baseload asset base in Ontario is comprised of roughly 7,000 megawatts of nuclear power and similarly roughly 7,000 megawatts of hydropower. The nuclear assets centered around the Durham region, our Pickering facility and our Darlington facility. And then our hydro assets, you can sort of see all those blue dots on the map really scattered throughout the whole province, as we always say, all the way from, Kenora to Cornwall. So a significant footprint there with, almost 70 stations. The map also kind of highlights, we do have a solar facility at Nano, only 40 megawatts, 44, but nonetheless, it builds into our diverse generating portfolio. We do have a gas fleet, so Atura is our gas subsidiary that we own for combined cycle gas facilities there, and we also have assets in the U.S. under our Eagle Creek Renewable Energy. So that gives you a sense of our footprint. And I think, the key message here, very strong, footprint in nuclear and hydro, but a very diverse generating portfolio as well. So I'm just going to try to move this thing that's in the way. Uh-oh. All right. Now I need to get back to the screen there. I've gotten myself off the screen. Anyone?
we can see the screen. I can see you and I can see the screen. So maybe just go back.
There we go, back up. Okay, it just flipped off. Oh, good. Won't touch any buttons. So this slide, I think really, it kind of highlights where we've been as a province and where we're positioned to go. So if we've already mentioned Nano coal closure. So from the period running from about 2004 until 2014, so a better part of a decade, we focused on closing our coal assets. And that took 9,000 megawatts of coal out of the system. So it was a decade-long process, culminating in, the last piece of coal burnt in 2014. And what that really means for Ontario, when you look at these graphics, you can see clearly that, back in 2005, electricity was part of the GHG problem, or the carbon emissions problem in Ontario. But as you look now, you see quite clearly carbon emissions from electricity are just that narrow little 2% of the pie, even with, a modest amount of natural gas in the system, which is really needed to run and back up some of the intermittent renewables. So you see quite clearly that electricity has gone from being part of the problem to now being part of the solution. And what that solution needs to focus on is the transportation sector. So some background there for everybody. And then this is, again, just a bit of point of pride that we should all feel about Ontario. And I think many jurisdictions in the world are held up as a bit of a standard of low carbon footprints. And I think up on the top graph there, when you see where Ontario stacks out against some of these other jurisdictions, it's pretty impressive. So you see, Ontario very well positioned, even with respect to Canada as a whole. But you look at other jurisdictions, and we are in great shape. We have done some very significant heavy lifting in closing coal and bringing on some clean generation forms. If you look at the graph below that, though, what the message really there is to build off of is that, what has enabled us to transition to such a clean grid in Ontario really is the backbone of the system, being our nuclear assets and our hydro assets. And I think as you look across the other jurisdictions, you see that that's true as well. So very, very well positioned. So, I spoke a little bit about, what has OPG done historically. It still remains a key point of pride for us, absolutely, having closed coal. But, where are we going to go from here? We've established a very clean footprint, and what are we going to do as a company in supporting the province and the country and North America as a whole and the world in reaching its climate change goals. So earlier this year, no, not this year, late last year, late part of 2020, we launched our climate change plan. And the climate change plan had two key commitments. One is to be a net zero carbon company by 2040. So, being slightly ambitious there in reaching that goal in 2040 ahead of the 2050 broader goal. But also, and this is, perhaps the more interesting piece, is we feel we're well positioned to be a catalyst for a net zero carbon economy by 2050. And so there's a whole host of innovative technologies and solutions that OPG is going to be making investments in furtherance of our own goal, but also in furtherance of the markets in which we operate. And those can be adopted by other hosts in supporting the broader decarbonization of the economy. And I'll touch on some of these. So in the time we have, I'm absolutely not going to be delving into every one of these. I think there's about 9 or so key initiatives that form some form of a backbone of our climate change goals. The focus is going to be on electrification, and I will get to that in just a moment. But wanted people to see that really there's, on the generation side, we are investing in small modular reactors. So those are smaller nuclear reactors, and we're also investing significantly in our hydro assets. Refurbishing them, overhauling parts of them that need to be updated, and making investments in building out our hydro generation. So that, the hydro and the nuclear really form kind of the backbone of the electricity system. But you'll see there's a host of other things there that we're doing. Electrification I will get into, but also looking at whether there's negative emissions technologies that could support decarbonization. We're looking at carbon offsets and nature-based solutions. So there's a whole host of things that we're looking at on our path to being net zero and supporting net zero. We don't have a prescribed pathway year by year of exactly how we're going to get there, because I think, as we all can agree, over time, technology, innovation, investment, and policies are going to drive things in different directions, but we certainly have a number of ways that we can get there. So electrification, so that's sort of the topic of the day. As everyone said, I think everyone agrees that EV growth is coming, and we could all spend a lot of time trying to figure out which one of these curves is right, and maybe that's not the most important part of the conversation, because it's going to happen. And I think, as you see, month by month, year by year, the OEMs are going to be stopping producing internal combustion engines and increasing their production of electric vehicles. So it's just a matter of time as we build that out. And I think probably the best part of the conversation we can have is how we are going to be there to support that, rather than debating exactly which growth curve. But it's an interesting perspective to look at. So what is OPG doing in this space? Electrification leading the charge. Yes, so there's a handful of really exciting electrification projects that are highlighted here. The work that we are doing with TTC to electrify their garages and build out the charging infrastructure needed, very exciting. I think a press release just went out on that yesterday, speaking about our relationship and the plans we have around that. I'll touch also on our EV fast charging network, Ivy, build out across Ontario. I think everyone can appreciate and understand that if you don't have the infrastructure and the access to fast charging networks, that EV adoption will be slowed. So an absolutely necessary part of the pie. And then just lastly, sort of on some ferry charging infrastructure that we've been working on as well. So the IV fast charging network, this is, we're proud to say soon to be the largest EV fast charging network across Ontario. So, 60 odd sites by the end of 2021 with double chargers at least at each of the sites, so 180 chargers. This is being built out in partnership with Hydro One, and also with some fairly generous funding from the federal government, from NRCan. So wanted to recognize that. So I don't think anyone would debate that, one's ability to travel from one end of the province to the other in an EV will be limited if there's not the access to the charging network. So we're very excited to start building this out. I will flip to the next one, which I think gives you a sense of how extensive the network is. The completed locations thus far, mostly centered up in northern reaches, and the 21 to construction focusing on southern parts, but very excited for that to happen. And as you can see, certainly plans underway for Waterloo and for Cambridge specifically to have an IV fast charger. And this just speaks a little bit about, the importance of having a seamless charging experience. The sites that we choose, so highway sites are critical, obviously, if you're traveling along the 400 series highways. Safe and easily accessible, but also urban sites, proximity to those dense areas. And then, as I said, some redundancy has been built into this planned build out, having a minimum of 2 chargers per station, because it's possible one could go out of service, and you certainly want to be able to have people charge their vehicles. So the other part of the equation that we're looking at, of course, the number of personal and light duty vehicles is the most significant when you look at it from an overall numbers perspective. But if you look at the big emitters, looking at the medium and heavy duty vehicles, they do produce a disproportionate share of the emissions. So while being a small piece of the pie on the left, when you look at the emissions, it's significant. So As I said, we are very, very excited to be announcing our relationship with TTC, working with Toronto Hydro as well. And I think you see there, looking at the scope of the project and the size of the project, looking at 8 garages there. So, you know, I've had, you know, years ago, I think we began conversations with TTC. And as you can probably appreciate, you know, Toronto being, you know, a fairly densely populated area, the TTC focus, you know, really is and needs to be on ridership and ridership experience. And so by being part of the conversation and supporting TTC on this, we bring the energy and electricity management expertise so that they can remain focused on the ridership piece. And we will focus on the charging infrastructure, the build out, maintenance, and operation of that. And also looking at the battery storage that will be needed to ensure that sort of ridership experience and reliability. So a very exciting project. Interesting that the release did just go out yesterday on that. So we're looking, obviously there's conversations that are being had with many other transit agencies, and we're looking to kind of develop a model through the TTC that could be deployed with other transit agencies across the province, including those in the Waterloo region. So we're very excited about that. And hydrogen. So I just wanted to spend a minute talking about hydrogen. I think hydrogen has gotten an incredible amount of attention in the last 6 months. I know, you know, the federal government and the provincial government are both working on strategies around hydrogen. And, you know, I think in earlier days, hydrogen was seen as a bit of a competing proposition when compared with electrification or battery electric vehicles. And I think that's not very true. I think when you look at the spectrum of transportation forms, some of them very, very clearly lend themselves to battery electric vehicles and electrification, or what's thought of as electrification. But then there's certain parts of the transportation segment that don't lend themselves to that. You know, perhaps rail, longer haul trucks, you know, those sorts of modes of transportation are challenged when you're looking at a pure battery electric solution. So we are looking at OPG to be a producer of clean hydrogen, so green hydrogen, using our clean generation to produce hydrogen, and to be a supplier to 2 main areas. One is in transportation, but also seeing what we can do to clean up our gas generation system. So a couple key projects are under development there, and we see a bright future for the hydrogen piece as well. And I think that takes me to the end. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Heather, and appreciate the overview. And there's a lot of meat on those bones there. You're doing a lot of activities at OPG, and it's important for us to understand that full scope. As a reminder to folks, please use the question box. If you've got a question, just put it in the question, and I'll monitor those and try and include those in as we go through the rest of our time together. Maybe, and this is a context question, I guess, Heather, to get started. Why has OPG released its climate plan now? I mean, some, you know, say there's a particular point, reason that it was in progress, or was it because of COVID, or was it delayed? You know, like what's the reason for now that it's being released?
That's a really good question. Well, I think, you know, I'll have to say, and maybe this isn't the best point to make about OPG being efficient and so on. It's been in formation for well over a year. And I mean, I guess if you could say anything about OPG, we're a company that likes to do things rigorously, I guess. So an awful lot of analysis went into the development of this climate change plan, and there was internal tension too in the development of it about what our goals should be, how ambitious should we be, how detailed of a plan should we have of exactly how we are going to get there and what our trajectory is going to be. So, you know, in many ways, it's been a long time coming in some people's minds at OPG. We could have had it out sooner, but I mean, I think as you look across the world, everyone needs to be embracing what is their goal in support of climate change. And so we felt we needed to do that as a company. We couldn't just be saying, well, we closed coal, we have a clean footprint, on we go. We needed to be supporting and contributing to that end state. And then I guess the other logical point about, why now is that, from looking at some of the information I presented there, you can see that the electricity system is an enabler of decarbonizing so many other sectors that need to be decarbonized, that are really a bit more a part of the problem now. So I think it's pretty critical that the electricity system and OPG come out and say, well, how are we going to clearly support that?
Now, the age-old issue of what we want to invest in and what the future is going to look like, then we come back to how does it actually impact people and businesses. So, I mean, that's one of the questions. I know the region is looking at this, their 80 by 50 program with sustainable water. One of the questions is worthwhile goal. Business generally supports that, but what does it mean for businesses? Like, how is it practically going to affect a ratepayer, whether it's business or an individual? Maybe talk a little bit about that. That's got to be part of the equation in terms of what it means for you're providing to the distribution network, but they're all the same customers. Maybe talk a little bit about managing that piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you think about building out the electricity system or leveraging the electricity system, there's ways that you can do it that are efficient and with ratepayers in mind, and then there are ways that aren't. So, I mean, a couple things I'd highlight. We are very fortunate to have the electricity system that we have, that I just spent a bunch of time talking about, and that it's a very logical next step to be thinking, how do we power the transportation sector? It's through electrification. But the sort of the real beauty of it is that when you take that existing cost base or fixed cost that is wrapped up in so much of our electricity infrastructure, and you spread it out over more megawatts in the form of new users from electrification of transportation, is you bring those costs down. So there's it's a numerator denominator type equation. It actually has the opportunity, significant electrification has the opportunity to put downward pressure on electricity rates. So that's always a point that's, I always say there's three really wonderful things about electrification. Is it's got a GHG benefit, it's got a jobs, economic and development and innovation benefit, and it actually has benefits for customers and ratepayers. So but then the other part, I mean, there's obviously a point at which you get to with electrification, with such aggressive electrification, that there could potentially be customer impacts, as you have to build out the grid further and further, and how you have to support more charging infrastructure and the electricity behind that. And that comes back a little bit to a point that was made earlier. It's about good charging habits and education and efficient use. So if you think about when is the electricity most strained, well, it's during peak hours, most regularly, well, back when we used to come home around 6 p.m. and turn on all our appliances and cook our meals and turn up our air conditioning and so on. Like, you need to be ensuring you're incenting behaviors for people to charge their vehicles overnight using a very, very affordable and clean baseload electricity, as an example. So I think it's going to take some tools to incent the right behaviors as we more broadly electrify. And I think a lot of that work is already underway. I think people are learning more and more about that.
So the challenges that our community and communities across the province might face as we go to that more electrified transportation grid, you've touched on that. Some of the questions that are coming in the chat box are around, what are your demand projections as we move to that electric vehicle adoption? I mean, that's got to be part of it, is as you move to that, are we going to have the system that's going to be able to sustain that? And part of that is it realistic, or what's the sense of gas generation still got to be part of the mix, certainly in the short term, but if we're going to move to that, you have to have reliable generation so that the lights go on and the plugs are charging when cars are plugged in. So maybe talk a little bit about some of those issues that of reliability and in making sure that the mix of production is there to sustain both consumers, individuals, but also business.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about sort of the here and now, or maybe this decade that we're in, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit further out. So, I mean, right here and now, as things stand, we have a very diverse generation mix in Ontario, which puts us in a really good position. I think we've seen events in other jurisdictions where the generation forms either didn't marry up with what could have happened from a climate change perspective in terms of resiliency and security of electricity supply. We've seen things like that happen. So in Ontario, we have a clean, diverse, secure supply that is affordable. So that puts us in a great position. And gas forms part of that mix. It's a very, very small part of the pie, but it is there for the resiliency needs that we have, for backing up intermittent renewables. And I guess I'll just say, you know, if we were to take that very small wedge of gas out of the equation, the overbuild that would be necessary in other generation forms and the backup storage that would be needed would be excessively expensive. And as I said, you know, this is a bit about efficiency, ratepayer interests, and the economy. You're far better off to take what we have in our system and power other sectors, decarbonize other sectors with it. So that's a bit about the system we have here and now. Our strength is in its diversity of generation forms. But then as you look further out, you know, if you look out past 2030 into 2040, and as you approach, you know, 2050 being a big goal for many and for North America and Canada, there will need to be a build out of additional infrastructure, electricity infrastructure to support that. But the good news is we're well equipped to do that. We have, you know, many ways we can do that in Ontario. We have a nuclear fleet. We are looking at small modular reactors and what those could mean for additional new nuclear supply. We have a great asset base and great opportunities in Ontario to build out further water power generation. There's a host of things that we can be doing, and we're not too late. We're not behind. But we will at some point, as we see more aggressive electrification, want to look to build out further some of those generation forms to support things as we get out into the 2030s and beyond.
There's a question that came in building on your comment around hydrogen and the tension in finding that resolution that with some of the tensions as we consider different technologies. The other one is nuclear. I mean, nuclear is a backbone of the along with hydro in terms of the base load of the system. But thinking specifically around both hydrogen and then that small modular reactors program, how does that fit into? I mean, are those elements significant elements of the climate change plan in the medium and longer term?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So small modular reactors. They form a key. I mean, there is growing evidence, an abundance of evidence, suggesting that you just can't get to net zero without having nuclear being part of that solution. I mean, hydro is fantastic, water power is fantastic, but you have geographic limitations with it. So where you're looking for that significant baseload, 24/7 reliable, cost-effective, clean power, nuclear is a very, very strong solution and part of that. And so we're looking at that sort of that next generation of nuclear reactors. We have two existing, with our Pickering and Darlington. Those are large-scale can-do fleets. We are looking at small modular reactors. We're looking to deploy one at our Darlington site where we already have a license and an EA in place. And when I say a small, I'm talking sort of 300, 400 megawatts. And the great thing then that we would like to do after that is not just focus on Ontario, but other jurisdictions in this country that need to get off coal in the late 2030 timeframe, late 2020s. And OPG is well positioned to support those other jurisdictions that want to look at small modular reactors and nuclear as a pathway to net zero. So I offer that on the SMR front, and the other thing about SMRs is they can also be in off-grid settings. So you can take what's called very small modular reactors, something in the 5, 10, 15 and smaller megawatt ballpark. And that presents a huge opportunity for remote communities, mining operations, the resource sector, a way to power those as an alternative to diesel. And then just briefly on hydrogen, I mean, I think it's critically important. We have our Atura gas fleet, and as I've mentioned, all the reasons why gas forms an important part of the system, but we are very interested in looking at ways we can minimize the already small GHG footprint from those facilities. And so hydrogen is part of that solution. And we're looking at, how much hydrogen could we put into that gas system and reduce the footprint of that.
So one of the, I think Catherine Fife's just put in, and it's an interesting question. How are the decisions made to partner with municipal transit systems, as an example, as they are moving? And you heard from Councillor Jaworski from Regional Council of transitioning their fleets to either, fully green fleets. Are those decisions that are is that in partnership with OPG, or how do those decisions get made about partnering with transit operators across the province?
Well, I mean, I think we are in a position and remain open to having conversations with any transit agency that's interested in partnering. And I guess the decision point, it more resides on the municipal front about whether that's something they are interested in doing. But of course, if they are, and as I said, many transit agencies, their focus really is on ridership and ridership experience and running a fleet. And they need to partner and look to partner with an entity who can support them on the electricity and energy management and the charging infrastructure and the backup storage assets that are needed to ensure they maintain the level of ridership that they need to deliver. So OPG is incredibly interested in speaking with transit agencies and partnering with many of them. And we're hoping the model for TTC could be something we could more broadly deploy across the province. So we are very open to that.
Good. Just in our last couple of minutes, and I think this is, the whole discussion we've had today is about transition and about what the new future looks like. As a business organization, where we would always ask the question, what's your, as you look to that net zero future and some of the new technologies and the new ways you're doing things at OPG, what does your workforce look like? I mean, presumably that means you're going to have different needs in terms of as a company, as Ontario Power Generation, you'll have new needs in your workforce. What does that look like? How are you kind of trying to address those?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a time of great opportunity at OPG. Now, within the backdrop of that, we will be closing our Pickering facility in the mid-2020s. So that's a bit of a backdrop for things, and that will mean changes for a contingent of our workforce. But I think as you look at the things that we are working on as a company, the diverse generation types and forms and innovative things we are looking at, electrification, hydrogen, small modular reactors, these all really offer opportunity for OPG and to think about developing new lines of business. So I think you're exactly right. It's going to be a diverse workforce. But I guess, probably a very important part of talking about diversity, I would also want to emphasize, how important diversity is to OPG and some significant goals that we set as an organization in the coming decade of what we want, how we want to be thought of and how we want to be viewed in terms of our strength around equity and diversity. So, we start from a fairly decent place in some ways. We have, a fairly diverse executive team. We have a board that is, 50% female. We have a female chair of our board. So, we have things to be proud of and some good ground that we've made as an organization over the past decade, but we have a long ways to go, as do many other organizations, as do many sectors. The energy sector as a whole has a long way to go. And so, we see great opportunity, and we have great commitment from our board, our CEO, and our executive to do that and to ensure our workforce continues to become diverse in the ways it needs to be successful and just to do the right thing.
The other part of that, just to finish up, I mean, is the technical capacities of your workforce going to change in a substantive way in terms of the types of employees you'll need as you move to more or different forms of generation, or is that just part of natural evolution? It wouldn't be a seismic shift. Is that just part of the evolution?
Yeah, I don't see a seismic shift. I think what it will be, we'll be trying to develop a workforce that can make decisions effectively, quickly, can operate in an innovative way. You know, we will look to foster, you know, in some ways, some entrepreneurial thinking and innovative thinking in the workforce we have, and we'll want to ensure, you know, we have the leadership that we need in each of those areas. So, no, I don't see a seismic change in any way. And of course, many of the technical roles, commercial roles, and the relationship building roles that form part of the workforce we have now will continue. It'll just be focusing on some different things than we have in the past, which I actually think creates a real time of excitement for everyone at OPG.
Listen, thanks so much, Heather. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and sharing with us today. Lots to consider, and it's great to get an update on the path to the future from OPG. Also, thank you to Michelle and Bardish, Catherine, and Dave for joining us today and bringing their thoughts. This does bring us to the end of our session. Thanks again to Ontario Power Generation and the Ontario Chamber of Commerce for arranging that with us today. And finally, to all of you for joining us. As a reminder, we'll be sending you a recording of today's session. We also have more events in the coming weeks, as well as our Wednesday Business Success Series, which is hosted every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. For full details and to register for any of our events, please visit greaterkwchamber.com. And I'll leave you with in the immortal words of my colleague, the President and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. I hope everyone stays positive, tests negative, because we're stronger together. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, and have a great day.